Was on the fence about doing like a for sale by owner
Mhm.
to like avoid all like the you know the rates you have to pay and like the money you have to give out to like realtors and stuff like
The
that.
fees.
Yeah, the fees and everything. What's your take on that?
Well, statistically, if you go back and look at it,
Yeah,
98% of for sale by owners do it successfully.
98%.
Or, sorry, cut that out. 98% of them don't do it
Oh, do
successfully.
not. Okay, okay.
Correct. So 2% of them are successful
Oh
at it,
wow.
right? And also, when we go back and look at the price that for sale by owners sell for,
Yeah.
it is significantly less than market value.
Uh.
And if I apply market value to
Mhm.
what a home sells for sale by owner, they would have pocketed more money even after paying the fees to their realtors.
No shit.
Mhm. And the other thing that's kind of different, especially in the state of Virginia, now I can only speak, really to the state of Virginia. I know a little bit about others, but I
Yeah.
kind of stick to what I truly
Right.
know. Is that a lot of people for sale by owner, they don't realize that there are still mandatory disclosure. So they're lead-based paint to Chinese
Uh
drywall
huh.
to if you have a septic tank, you have to disclose whether or not there's anything material or latent defects to your property.
Mhm.
And a lot of homeowners don't realize that. So when you're doing it for sale by owner and you don't make those disclosures and you get to closing and your buyer closes, a month down the road, if they find out that you knew something that you didn't
Mm.
disclose to them, you've now opened yourself up to a bunch of
So you kind
lawsuits.
of got to be careful, like how you market it, what you're saying.
100%.
Yeah, it sounds like a pain in the butt.
When you have a realtor, they're going to come in, they're going to talk to you, they're going to ask you all these questions,
Hmm.
they're going to give you all of the proper disclosure forms that you have to
Right,
read
because you
over.
just fill out all the
Yeah,
forms and then you disclose to them so they know what to disclose to everyone else.
correct.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it is a buyer beware state, right?
Yeah.
So it is up to a buyer to get a home inspection, what have you.
Mm.
But a lot of times there are certain things that a seller may know
Right.
that are required to be disclosed that they may not tell you.
Yeah.
And if a buyer finds that out post closing, it does open you up to litigation.
So how would you even? That would just be something they discover like on their own, and then it could be a problem that they knew existed because of the magnitude of the problem.
So let's say you have a lot of places here in Norfolk have basements, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is ridiculous because we live in a very
Floody area. Yeah.
flood prone
Yeah.
area. But let's say that let's say you're having some issues with cracking in your basement. You're having, moisture issues, fungus issues, what have you. And I call up a termite moisture company, or I call a crawl space and basement company, and they come in and they're like, we were here 6 months ago. And here's the report that we gave the owner 6 months ago. And that owner didn't disclose that report to you during your transaction. That's something
Uh,
that should have been disclosed to you prior. So believe it or not, those things do happen.
really,
Mhm.
pretty frequently.
Yeah.
Have you ever been a part of a deal where like, I guess on the buyer side where you sold a house with them, you worked with them, found them a house, and then 6 months later there's like, we found there was mold all through the walls or something like that.
Well, it has to be something that you can see,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let's say, so you're talking about something that's behind the walls.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're a buyer and we're going through the process of getting a home inspection, termite moisture inspection, right? Chances of me finding mold behind these walls, unless there's something that leads to that investigation,
Right. Are
are
very
going to
low.
be slim,
Yeah.
right? I mean, even if there's mold and fungus in the crawl space, it's typically going to be kind of centered around the crawl
Mm-hmm.
space. Unless you have evidence of, discoloration on the walls or discoloration on the ceiling,
Right, right, right.
you're not really going
You
to
would never
start to
know.
investigate behind the wall.
I got you, yeah. Because a buddy of mine, him and his wife bought a house in Norfolk, and then it turns out like they closed. It was like their dream house,
Yeah.
and it turns out like there was black mold
Mm.
in the house, and she was a realtor actually. So
Was she?
yeah, so she was an agent, so she like knew of everything that you could know,
Yeah.
and it turns out like they were working with the seller to eradicate the mold, and after like tens of thousands of dollars they still couldn't get rid of it, and they just like I think they were able to like forgo the sale, got their money back.
So this was
Like,
prior to them closing.
well, they had already closed, I think. Like they had closed on the house, and they were living in it, and they discovered all this stuff.
And they were able to get out.
And as far as I know, I didn't really follow up and get specific details, but like when I was talking about it, because like we kept in touch a little
Yeah.
bit, because she sold me the house on West Glen,
Yeah.
and yeah, like she was like, yeah, they're paying for most of it, they're paying for all the attempts to eradicate,
Yeah.
and she was like, it wasn't successful, and then it turns out like he got ordered somewhere else, and he's gone. So they moved, and they just didn't even ever move in there. So it's kind of crazy. I don't know if you ever seen anything
Well, I will
wild
say,
like that.
typically once it's closed, it's closed. I will say that. Typically, once it's closed, it's closed.
Maybe she sold it.
In my 13 years, I've never seen a reversal.
Yeah.
But typically, once the property is closed, it has transferred.
Okay.
Because you have multiple options of re-inspections and all of that.
Yeah,
Unless they wrote in some type of clause in the
Right,
deal.
right, right. So
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
she just resold it,
she could have.
and then she got like he paid to fix it, and they were like, "We're just getting the fuck out
Yeah.
of here," and they
Yeah.
just,
I have seen negotiations post closing where you go to a seller and you're like, look, this is something you should have disclosed to us. This is a problem, right?
Right.
They don't want to. They don't want to go to court. It's going to cost them more money, right? You start getting into attorney's fees, court costs, and all of that, and then also fixing the repairs.
Right,
Sometimes
right.
it's better just to go ahead and fix the repair.
Yeah, no kidding.
But if a seller, I mean, if a seller didn't know about it, chances of getting them to pay for that repair is going to be slim.
Yeah, but yeah, it's pretty wild.
Buyer beware.
Yeah.
Buyer beware.
Yeah, no, it's always like the scary part of it. You're just like, like with like market stuff, and this is a big military area, and you've been an agent in this area for the entire time you've been an agent.
Yeah.
So like, how does the military really affect like market trends for this area?
Well, I would say that the one thing that the military has really helped with Hampton Roads as a whole is market value. Even like back when you think back to 2008 and the market crash, we didn't really have the amount of foreclosures that the rest of the nation had. I mean, yes, we had them. Yes, our property values went down. But when you have constant military moving in and moving out, and obviously you have the beauty of a VA loan,
Right,
100% VA financing and VA backing.
Yeah.
Transactions were still moving forward. So it kind of helped to sustain our real estate market and our real estate economy. And I think like even right now, when the interest rates are higher, a lot of our conventional buyers are kind of holding back, right? They're hoping for those rate drops to go down.
Right.
But the banks, the lending institutions are offering a lot of incentives to VA buyers right now. So you're seeing a lot of VA loans still going through. I mean, you got to move. I mean, when they're PCS and they're coming to our area, rent's outrageous.
Right.
I mean, to rent in Norfolk right now,
the
cost for a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a far better investment for a veteran or an active duty to come in here and to purchase a home with their VA loan.
Right. I mean, when I bought my first house, one of my good buddies, he was like pushing me to do it. He's like, don't rent.
No.
There's no point in renting.
No.
Like, why would you pay someone else's mortgage kind of stuff,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a benefit to y'all. I mean, I have a client moved here 13 years ago. He was one of my first deals. And everywhere he has moved, he has purchased a home. And 13 years later, he's building right now a $1.9 million house in Northern Virginia.
Wow.
I mean, he's gone from $250,000 house in Yorktown, Virginia back in the day to building $1.9 million home in Northern Virginia. And he has accumulated a very nice rental portfolio working towards that.
Wow, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
What other things like affect markets, like house markets? Like, how does it determine what's a buyer's market, seller's market? Like, can you go into details like that? Like, spread some knowledge on that?
Well, maybe back to 2020, we were definitely in a seller's market.
Right, yeah.
We had very low inventory. We had the rates were, I think a lot of people are sitting here looking at these 2.5%, 3% interest rates. Even you, when you were buying, you were so fixed on those interest rates, wanting that 2.5% and that 3%.
Yeah, facts.
A lot of people don't realize that those were manipulated interest rates. Like chances of seeing a 2.5%, 3%, I'll probably never see that in my career again.
Really?
No, I mean, it was.
How are they manipulated? Like,
they were manipulated to keep our economy going artificially by the lending institutions.
So they like all agree, like, hey, these are the rates.
They we had to keep they had to keep the economy moving forward,
Hmm.
because if not, it was going to crash. I mean, we were all at home.
Right.
No one was spending. I mean, no one was spending money. It's just like, look at your stimulus checks. Nobody was making money. All of these small
Facts.
businesses were closing down.
Trying to get people out there to do that. Yeah.
They were trying to keep the economy moving.
Yeah.
And so we had this low inventory. We had all of these low interest rates. We had people getting stimulus money. We had people freeing up money.
Hmm.
They were sitting in these homes that were all of a sudden skyrocketing in
Right.
value.
Yeah.
And
Facts.
it gave them the opportunity to upgrade. So what they were doing is they were pulling the equity out of their house by selling it, and they
Hmm.
were upgrading. And what that created was a seller's market. You were able to sell your house for 50, 60, $70,000 over value. People
Right.
were able to pay it because they were pulling the equity out of the home, their first time homes that they were
Right.
selling for 50, $60,000 above value.
Yeah.
They were pulling that cash and they were applying
Reloading it in. Yeah.
reloading it in, and it was great. I mean, look,
Yeah.
it was great. But now, as the interest rates have continuously gone up,
Hmm.
they have not come down.
Right.
You know,
They've dropped a
but
little bit. I think
they've
like
dropped a
yeah.
little bit. But I mean, people are still in that mindset of that 2 year period of that 2.5 to 4%.
Right. Right. It's never gonna be like that again. They're just
No,
used to it. They're like, I want that 2.5.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, look, me personally, we refinanced to a 2.5%, 15 year, to a two
Can't
and a
beat
half percent
that, man.
15 year note. You can't beat that.
Yeah, that
Well,
interest makes a difference too. Like
I
in
mean, I'm never
payment
going to
per month.
sell it, but
I
it's
know.
not going
Yeah.
to stop me from moving on.
Right. Right.
Whereas some people, they're like, they are so stuck to that interest rate. They are married to that rate and they are married to that house, so they're not moving. We are seeing people that are making the decision to stay where they are, stay put.
Yeah.
So the transactions are slowly going down.
Mm.
The interest rates are slowly climbing. We still have a little bit of lower inventory, but it's higher than it was back in 2021, 2022. And right now it's a seller's. I mean, it's a buyer's market. Buyers
Right.
are now able to ask for closing costs again.
Right. Right.
They're
Right.
not having to waive inspections. They're not having to pay above
Yeah, that's
guarantee
something that
appraisals.
changes a lot. So like that kind of was why I asked that because I remember when I was first buying my house, I could add like splitting the closing costs was like 6 and 6, and then like it trended more towards like buyers are having to front the entire closing costs, and then like that kind of fluctuates based on the market, right? Like so like if it's a buyer's market, then the buyer is not having to put forward as many fees. Is that like kind of what that means? Like that whole
Yeah, so in a seller's market, sellers are, they're basically able to get what they want for their house. They're able to, sometimes they're able to get deals where the buyer's waiving a home inspection. They don't
yeah.
have to worry about going through that process, and they're not having to pay a buyer's closing costs, and
Hmm.
buyers aren't asking for that. In a buyer's market like we are right now, buyers are starting to ask for their closing costs to get covered again because sellers don't have as many offers coming in on their homes. The
Mm,
competition has lessened.
right.
So when you're sitting on the market for 15 days, 20 days, and you get that one offer in, and that buyer, they don't have as much cash as they did 5 years ago, and they need a little bit of assistance from the seller. They
Right.
need that 3% towards their closing costs to be able to purchase your home. Sellers are more willing to give up that right now.
Gotcha. And that does make sense too. Like the more people putting offers in, the more competitive your offers have to be, and that includes paying those costs instead of
Exactly.
yeah. So then the buyer would be or the seller would be more likely to take your offer if you're taking the fees off their plate.
Exactly right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting. Like kind of how it sways. Like you
Yeah.
kind of want to buy at the right time,
Yeah.
but it always doesn't work out that way. You know.
I mean, it's kind of like back, going back to when the interest rates were so low, when you would list a house, you would have to do what we call net to seller sheets,
Hmm.
right? And I mean, when you were getting 15, 20 offers within 24 hours of listing a home, I mean, there were lines down the sidewalk
Right.
waiting to get in to show the house. And then you
Dang.
get all these offers and
I
you'd have
couldn't
to
even.
line them all up.
Yeah,
And,
you love that, huh? They're
oh
like,
my
hell yeah.
gosh. I mean, it was great,
Yeah.
but you showing them the difference between all of the offers and what it brought them as the seller.
Right.
you know, we don't, you still have that. You still have that some today. It's more neighborhood specific. It's more type of home specific.
Hmm.
It's more price range specific. But it's definitely lessened.
No doubt. Is there any way for like a buyer to navigate high interest rates? Like if the interest rates are 7%, other than the assumption game, obviously like that like kind of just worked out in our case that one time, but like if I'm a buyer and I'm like, man, interest rates are like 7%, is there anything they can do to kind of like, uh, navigate around that or make it easier for them?
Well, I mean, so you know, when you're writing your offers, a lot of times, so we use certain clauses in the purchase agreement,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to the closing cost assistance,
Yeah.
right? So, my typical clause is seller agrees to pay 3% of the purchase price towards all allowable buyer's closing costs to be used towards points, prepaids,
Mm.
and any closing cost, and to be used at the discretion of the lender, which then allows the lender to use that 3% that the seller is willing to pay towards that buyer's closing cost. They can buy down the rate.
Right, right.
That's going to be a lender, more on the lender
Right.
side
So
of
they would
things.
offer that to you, yeah.
Right.
Do
I
you
mean, it all
recommend
depends on the
do
lender.
you recommend the buy down? Do you think that's effect like a good idea for someone
I think it
buying?
depends on how long you're going to be in the property,
Hmm.
right? I had this discussion with my lender the other day because we have a buyer who's moving to the area. I hope they don't see this. We have a buyer that's moving to the area who was dead set on, similar to you, assumption.
Yeah.
Just wanted to do an assumption, but they're VA, but they didn't want to use their VA. They did not want to pay that VA funding fee. They wanted to either do a conventional loan, 20% down, or they wanted to assume. But they're only going to be here for 2 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think dumping that kind of money up front to pay the difference between the purchase price and the remaining balance of the loan for
Yeah.
the assumption, I think liquidating that type of cash for 2 years to avoid a 6% interest rate, I think that $100,000 would be better spent somewhere else,
Somewhere
making
else.
some money for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Assumptions are pretty trendy right now, huh? I
I mean, they are, but they are and they're not. I mean, most veterans aren't willing to allow someone to assume their loan unless they're willing to
right, right, right. I just hear I'm like
substitute their eligibility.
I swear once we were looking into doing it with this home, I started hearing it everywhere. Like weird, like that weird eerie, like you buy a car, you start seeing a car kind of thing. It's
Yeah,
like everyone was talking about it, and then like obviously me having experienced it, I would like bring it up to people like, hey, like this is what we did. Maybe this would work for you.
yeah,
Maybe like you kind of got to have the cards lined out, and everything has to work out.
yeah.
But maybe it's something you can look into.
How easy was
You
it?
know, it was not easy
It
at
was
all.
not easy at all. And
But yeah.
after you, I did 6 of them,
Oh
and I
god,
have another one
did
under
we start the
You
the
started the
roller
trend for
coaster, dude?
2024.
Oh,
Let me
god,
tell you.
you were probably
Um,
pulling your hair out.
Dude, I was. It's a nightmare because every lending institution was different. And I mean, I don't think any of them were prepared for the amount of assumptions that
Yeah.
people were going to want to do last year. And they were like rushing to get these assumption departments staffed and
Mm,
ready to be able to take on the onslaught of assumptions that were coming into their departments.
right.
And I mean, they weren't prepared to do them. And they're still not prepared to do them.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that I'm doing right now, we wrote the contract 3 weeks ago, and the lending institution said, "We'll take your application on March 8th."
Okay.
Yeah, that's how backlogged they
That's
are.
crazy.
I mean, it's a timeline, but I think
Yeah.
I mean, we could sit here and talk for 3 hours about assumptions.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's just a whole.
It's a thing, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So before we went into it and did it on ours, I remember you had said like you had seen one or two. Now that you said like you've done a whole bunch after that, does that kind of stuff like just as a realtor like it just builds your experience? So now you've seen it.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I think it's kind of interesting how your experience as a realtor will strengthen based on kind of the interactions and customers you get that you're trying to get them the house they love or want, you know?
Well, I think that as a realtor, so I I'm a trainer, right? So what I do is I train new agents who come to our firm to build their business.
Hmm.
So when they're fresh out of school, they learn about real estate, but they don't learn how to run a business.
Right.
And when you are running a real estate business, you have to learn to roll with the punches and roll with the tide. And as the tide changes, you need to learn different ways to make an income, right?
Yeah.
Most realtors kind of get stuck in a rut of buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. But, the assumptions was something that I knew was coming up. And obviously, I did 6 of them last year. It would blow your mind how many realtors are out here right now. I could pull up the MLS that are marketing a property and saying seller willing to allow assumption of whatever percentage loan.
Mm.
And then I call them and they have no idea the process. They have no idea how long it takes.
Mm.
They don't know the interest rate. They
Right.
don't know the remaining balance. They know nothing about the assumption process.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's important that when you're working in a market, especially that's heavily military, where assumptions have become very big,
Right.
that you're knowledgeable about that process.
Yeah, no
But I mean,
kidding.
it's ever changing too, and it's different with each institution.
Yeah. I mean, picking your realtor is important
It is.
because someone could be selling you something or like promoting themselves, like, oh, I know all this stuff, and you're like, all right, let's do that, and then you get into it, and they're not as knowledgeable as they probably should be or as you thought they are, and now you're missing out on homes. You're doing the wrong things, probably losing more money than you should or whatever.
I'm gonna give you a prime example, and you're gonna laugh at this. The very first one that I called for this client that I'm talking about that's under contract right now is they were marketing out
Mhm.
seller willing to allow buyer to assume their VA loan
Right.
at a 3.25% interest rate. So I called her and I said, "What's the remaining balance of the loan?
Yeah.
How much longer is left on the loan?" And then I said, "Great. When does your buyer want to close?" Do you know what she said to me? 30 days.
Oh God. Don't hold your
In
breath.
30 days.
Yeah. No
I
shot.
said, "Do you know how long this process takes?" I said, "They are quoting at least 60 to 90 days from start to finish, and you're lucky to make it in 60
That's
to
it.
90
Yeah.
days."
You're lucky.
I mean, we were on the phone almost every single day
My God.
during years. So.
Every week it was like, all right, I think we're ready, and then it's like, hey, we need all these documents that we didn't ask, that we could have asked for, and then you're just going through that for 3 months alone. It felt
Remember
like,
5 days before they were like, "Oh yeah, you don't qualify," and
Oh,
then all
yeah.
of a sudden you're like, "Wait, what?"
yeah, I called the VA like 4 times. I like looked I was like pretty much looking up freaking real estate law. like yo, you are wrong.
We have given
Yeah.
you this document 5 times that shows you I have full eligibility.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's crazy.
ridiculous.
Yeah. What advice would you have for new home buyers? Like I'm a dude I'm a dude or gal that's like, hey, I don't have a home. I've never bought a home. What do I do? How do I do it? What do you recommend?
I mean, that's always the hardest one. I think that you need to make sure that you're not just hiring your cousin who's a realtor, or your best friend who's a realtor. I think that doing your research and finding somebody who is knowledgeable about your market, knowledgeable about your area is very important, because buying a home is very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Buying a home is one of the biggest things that 99.99% of us will ever invest in.
Big decision too.
It's a huge decision. I think that it's having a good team behind you. It's having a good lender. It's having a good local lender. Local lenders you can call on the weekends, right? If you have a good relationship with them, and having, again, a good realtor. But I think the number one thing is to be patient.
Mm-hmm.
To set your expectations up front.
Mm.
I see a lot of people who the age of buying your first home is getting later, I think. A lot of people aren't buying their first home until their 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that point, I think a lot of people are looking for their forever home.
Right.
I don't think that that's the right move. I mean, I think it's better to
I agree
look
with
for
that.
what's good for you right now.
Right.
I always talk about like a 5 to 6 year plan.
Mm-hmm.
If you look over the averages of the course of the past 50 years, right, and market trends, like, yes, we've had crashes, but real estate's a wave, right? But it's a wave that continues to go up.
Right.
And I think that I tend to tell people, this needs to be a 5 to 6 year plan. Is this your forever home? Are you going to live in this house forever?
No, definitely.
Probably
Yeah,
not,
probably not.
right? I mean, you don't need to look at it that way.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's good
That's my
advice.
number. That's
Yeah,
my
that's
number
solid.
one thing to tell people is
Yeah.
this is not your forever home. You need to find what works for you now.
I think the patience thing's big too.
Patience is huge.
Because I mean, I know I could speak for myself, is when I'm really into something, I'm like, I want this so bad, like I want to do this. But I feel like maybe as a new home buyer, people would be too blinded by what they really think they want and not look at the bigger picture, like, hey, maybe I should let this one pass and get one that's better for me. And like you said, in that 5, 6 year plan, and not like setting all your eggs in one basket, like this is the one, this is it, you know?
I think that television and social media has
Yeah.
really put the blinders on everybody too. I mean, I I always try and set up my home buyers with something regardless of their price range. Whether you're buying a $200,000 3 bedroom, two
Hmm.
bath rancher or $1 million home, and again,
Right.
I want you to be able to make money when you sell this home, right? And I feel like I try and set people up in a position where in every property, like I want to get you a house where you can make it your own,
Hmm.
do a few things over the course of the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years,
Yeah.
however it is, and let's sell it for a profit when you're ready to move on.
Right.
Don't buy someone else's flip. Don't buy someone else's dream. Don't buy someone else's cheap granite, cheap LVP flooring.
Right. Right.
Do something. Get something that you can make your own,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
and you're probably going to get a better price on it too.
Yeah. Fair. I feel like the string of rental, like having a string of rentals, is like a good tactic as well. Which like I've kind of gotten into in a sense. Like I bought my first home in Florida.
Mhm.
I'm renting that out now.
Right.
And then I have a house that my dad's currently living in that I
Right.
first rented out when I got here, and now we're living here. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I think even buying a home as a first time home buyer, and with the expectation of that home is not going to be my forever home, but I can rent it out, have someone else pay my mortgage if it works out that way, and then use it as an investment tool later on.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I just think that wasn't my mentality when I first bought my home. But looking back, I think everything lined up to where it works out, and it just benefits. It's like, the benefits are huge with that.
Absolutely. I mean, it becomes a nice little nest egg for you. I think that the thing that most people though have difficulty with is if you go to move on to the next one, it's coming up with the down payment for the
Right,
next
right.
one, and the majority of people are going to have to sell that home to come up with the capital to be able to buy the next one.
Right.
But there are ways to kind of work around that with your lender, and but don't take financial advice from me because I've heard this thing from Dave Ramsey. And you know who Dave Ramsey is, but do you
Yeah.
know Dave Ramsey?
I don't know. I think I heard of him, but I don't really know. What is he, like an investor or something?
No, Dave Ramsey's that guy who's always like, don't borrow money from anywhere. Don't
Oh,
borrow money. Don't borrow money. But he's like this multimillionaire who I can assure you had
has
borrowed
borrowed money.
to
Yeah,
get to
yeah,
where
yeah.
he is today.
No, I got you. That's
Um,
funny. What common mistakes do you see buyers or sellers make? And how can they be avoided?
oh, Lord. Common buyer mistakes.
Yeah, let's start with buyers.
I think common buyer mistakes goes back to what we were talking
Yeah.
about is the expectation.
Right.
I think that playing the rate game
Mm-hmm.
is a very common buyer mistake. One that was made by my brother-in-law. Sorry. They 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 found a home that they really loved, but I think that the rate was kind of this is back when it was like 5.
Yeah.
And here we are 2 years later, and we're still looking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they're kind of kicking themselves in the butt that
Because
they
it's
didn't
only
move
gone
on
up.
it.
Yeah.
It's only gone up. You can't really pay the rate game. You got to buy when you need to buy.
Right.
If you need
When
to
it works
move,
for you, yeah.
when you need to move, you need to buy. I think that again, setting the expectations for something that is outside of your price range. And I think that the number one thing that I always tell my buyer is this: I might be approved for $1 million, $2 million loan, but do I want that monthly payment?
Mm.
You know, a lender might say that, yes, you're approved for this, but when I sit down and I look at my finances and I look at how much is going out each month,
Right.
am I comfortable with that payment? I
Mm.
think the number one thing that a buyer needs to do before they start shopping is they need to sit down with their lender and they need to say, this is what I am comfortable spending each month. What does that get me?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you take that number, you give that to me as your realtor, and then we start shopping.
Right. Right.
Because the worst thing you can do is your lender tell you, oh, you're good for $500,000. We go start looking at $500,000 houses, right? You find one that you love. We send it to the lender. The lender looks up the taxes, the estimated insurance. They send you that monthly payment, and you have sticker shock, and you're like, I don't know that I can afford this each month, right?
Right. Right.
But if we combat that up front, then I'm not going to be sending you homes that all of a sudden we go look at, and then you're not comfortable making that monthly payment.
Right.
I think
Right.
it's good to kind of get all of that out of the way up front. Let's find out where you're comfortable.
Yeah, I feel like that ties back to having a good real estate agent, though.
It does.
Because like if you have a good real estate agent, they're gonna understand that, and they're gonna give you the information to make you more comfortable along the process, but
Right.
give you all the information you need to make the educated decision when it comes time to it.
And most lenders, I mean, most lenders are they're going to be, it's no different than buying a car. You go to
Right.
your bank and you say, I want to buy a new car.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to say, okay, well, you can buy a $60,000 car. Okay, well, do you want a $60,000 car payment? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
up to you. I don't know. Is that how much you want to pay each
Right.
month? I don't know. I think that it does go back to that relationship with your realtor. I mean, hopefully your realtor is having these conversations
Mhm.
with you during their buyer consultation.
Right. 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 So you can
We
make.
didn't get to have a buyer consultation.
We did
because You
not.
walked in.
It
here
just
and said
worked
you wanted to
out.
buy this house.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It just worked out, right? Yeah. What about sellers? Common mistakes for sellers that you've seen.
I think that common mistakes for sellers is not listening to their real estate professional when they're pricing the home,
Mm-hmm.
and expecting a higher price than what it's truly worth.
Mm.
It's not worth my time as a realtor to take a home that is overpriced because it's marketing cost if it's not going to sell. It's time when it's not going to sell.
Right.
It's my agents who are going to be holding it open, right?
More work for you to have to constantly show it, everything. Yeah.
I think that it's overpricing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it is not packaging it for sale. So we have a checklist that when we sit down and go through our listing appointment with you, of things that we think that you need to do to get your property ready for sale. Curb appeal is big. We're talking like a weekend, right? A weekend spent of a little bit of elbow grease. If you can't do it, we have people that can come in and do it for you.
Right, right.
It's a little bit of effort spent to get you the best value.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're spending the money to do high end photography, high end video.
Right.
I mean, that's out of our pocket. So
yeah.
if you can just cut your grass, get your flower beds looking all right, get the house clean and decluttered before we come in.
So get it like show ready, essentially.
Get it show ready. Yeah. So I would say getting it show ready. I would say pricing it too high, and then I would say being unwilling to work with buyers.
Mm. Too stubborn.
Yeah. And then unwillingness to pay buyers agents. I think that after the huge NAR lawsuit that kind of made its wave across the nation.
Damn, I hear about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sellers are all of a sudden like, oh, we don't have to pay buyers agents anymore. But when I sit down and I talk to a seller, I say, okay, let me ask you this. When we sell this house, where are you moving? And they'll be like, oh, move into Florida or move into North Carolina. Okay, are you going to buy a house? Yeah. Do you have a realtor there? Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you writing a check to your realtor for $25,000 for the 3% of whatever it is that you're buying down there, or however, let's say they're buying a $500,000 house. Are you going to write them a check for $15,000, so 3%, to represent you as your agent? No. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How are they getting paid?
Right. Oh, the seller. Yeah.
Right. So combating that has kind of it's been a little difficult, but typically if you have a conversation with the seller, they realize, look, most offers that are going to come in on a property, the buyer's agents are writing that the seller's going to pay their commission.
Right.
And to be competitive in the market, the seller needs to be willing to do that.
Yeah, that's fair. Want to go to the bathroom real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
You have to go? All right, I'll be right back. All right, we're back. Yeah, you really could go. There's so many ways you can go. Yeah. So I just had like some questions specifically for buyers and then some seller stuff.
Okay.
Um, but when it comes to buying a house, obviously there's a wide variety of things people like you're concerned about, but home inspections in particular, like what are some things buyers should be looking out for in a home inspection?
So I think that my home inspector does a really good job of kind of outlining this,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of teach all my students this is that they do safety, maintenance, and then or safety, concern, and then maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that safety issues, so electrical, that's going to be potential fire.
Yeah.
If you have something failing with the roof, something failing with the foundation, anything with the plumbing,
Mm-hmm.
the anything that's going to be a major concern, right? I try not to let my buyers nitpick a house when it comes to like dings in the floor.
Cosmetics
Yeah.
and stuff.
I
Yeah.
mean, you don't really want to go after stuff like that. But I
Right.
mean, if you have a major safety concern, such as something in the electrical panel, something with outlets that could potentially be a fire hazard, rotting wood in the crawl space, the joists, the
Yeah. Yeah.
supports, I mean, the piers, the sill plate of the house. I mean, the
Right.
sill plate's like kind of where the home sits on the foundation.
Oh, okay.
So you have
Okay.
your foundation blocks, the sill plate, and then the home,
Mm-hmm.
the joists run across.
Yeah. 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 No, I'm
If
with you.
it's rotting out, it needs to be
That's
taken
not
care
good.
of.
But they should be looking at that.
They should
Yeah.
be, yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. So obviously, like having a home inspector, like someone you trust, matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's also important to have a home inspector who is honest, but also someone who isn't out there just to scare the buyer. I mean, my home inspector does a really good job of, talking through the home inspection. So at the end of the home inspection, he's going to sit there, he's going to talk with you about everything that he
Right.
found, then he's going to submit you the report,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're welcome to call him at the end of it. He's going to go through it with you and tell
Right.
you if it's a major concern or whatnot. But at the end of the day, a home inspector is also going to should always defer to an expert. So
Makes
let's
sense.
go back to the sill plate.
Right.
If he sees that there's a rotting sill plate, he's not going to say seller should repair that. He's going to say
Consult a professional to give it a
cross-based
professional analysis.
analysis.
Yeah.
He's going to say, should be evaluated by a licensed and qualified crawl space
Right.
foundation expert.
Are there like inspectors that have those qualifications and can make that call on their own?
I
No.
mean, there might be.
You ever
I
seen
don't want to
anything
say
like
no,
that?
but
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I don't come across that.
That's just a random thought I had.
I mean, it's kind of like roofer, right? So if a home inspector goes up and he says, the roof looks to be at the end of its life expectancy,
Right.
or I have a feeling some of the decking board might be rotting out, or
Yeah.
what have you. He's going to say, get a qualified
Just to make sure.
licensed roofer in here to evaluate it, right?
Right. That makes sense. What are like some red flags when it comes to home inspections that buyers should like look out for? They're like, maybe this is like not a good idea to buy this house.
Let me use my brother-in-law again.
Yeah.
So when they wrote on a home that when you walked through the home, it was beautiful, right? So we walked through into the dining room, hardwood floors, vaulted ceilings, skylights, beautiful trim. Well, when we got the home inspection, the dining room was built on top of a deck.
Oh, what?
On top of a deck. And we're talking 2 stories, like a 2-story vaulted ceiling, brick, all on the weight of supports that were meant for a deck.
What?
Yeah.
How's that even legal?
Right. Probably should not have made it through the building and codes department.
Right.
To mention the county, but it shouldn't have made it through. Somehow it did, or maybe they didn't even pull the permits. But we ended up walking away from that deal. Someone else bought it. It was good for someone else, but personally, I probably
Don't want to assume that risk.
don't want to assume that risk.
Yeah, that's
especially
pretty
on a
wild.
$700,000 house.
Dang, dude, that's pretty insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe that made it through those inspections.
But see, it's little things like that that people don't think about. I mean, yeah, electrical stuff. I mean, that's obvious, right? That
Yeah,
when I don't even know that another home inspector would have picked that out.
really.
I don't. I really don't know.
That's
I mean,
kind of scary.
it was very. It wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
It wasn't too obvious. I mean, he thought that it could be, and he obviously deferred to a qualified contractor to have it evaluated.
Right.
So, I sent my contractors out there to go take a look at it, and 100% like built on the deck.
Wow. I feel like that is a prime example of why home buyers have lots of fear, because they're like, what if I were to buy a house and my kitchen's built on a deck and my kitchen collapses, like the worst case scenario,
Well, I mean, my contractor said, I mean, chances of this falling,
are
there
very
was
low.
no evidence. I
Right.
mean, there was no evidence of any cracking in the walls. There was no evidence of crack. I mean, what was really funny is that the brick foundation that was on the exterior was
Yeah.
not even attached to the home. It was a facade to match the rest of the brick foundation around the exterior of the home. I don't even know that the seller, I mean, I'm guessing, but I don't even know that the seller knew it. I think that
Wow.
the seller purchased the home with it existing,
And
he
didn't
had
even
no
know.
idea.
So it just comes back to your
Right.
home inspector.
They ultimately
Get a
said,
good home
"Get a
inspector,
good
damn
home
it. You hear
inspector."
that?
Get a good home
Yeah,
inspector. Yeah,
that's pretty
do your
wild.
research.
Right, right. Um, as a home buyer, what's a good way to make your offer stand out against other people who are also bidding on the same house you love?
It's kind of hard, man. I mean, it just all depends on your financial situation. I mean, a lot of people are out here. I have people in my office, great friends, who are sometimes willing to waive inspections. That's just not something that I can never recommend to a buyer to waive a home inspection.
Right.
Um, I just can't in good conscience do that.
Yeah, yeah. So
You know,
people do that as like a
they
to
do,
make their offer
yeah.
seem better. It's like, hey, I'll waive this inspection if you take my offer.
I'll accept it on my listings all day long. You don't want to do a home. I mean, I just accepted one yesterday.
Really?
Someone wrote a cash offer on a listing, no inspections, no contingencies, closing it in 30 days. I'll take that all day long on a listing. But for my buyers, I just can't. I can't in good conscience recommend to my buyer, let's buy this house without a home inspection. If you're writing an offer on a home and that seller is expecting no home inspections, I don't think you should buy that house.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't think you should buy that house. I think that what you have to do is, if it's a home that you really love, you have to put your best foot forward on your offer. Um, my strategy, especially during the COVID warfare of home buying,
Yeah.
was to secure the deal
Right.
and negotiate the home inspection.
Gotcha.
And still kind of my tactic today.
Yeah, it makes
If
sense.
you really want the home, let's secure the
And you
offer
can negotiate the rest later.
and negotiate the rest later. Because the home inspection, you have that period. It opens negotiation. Your earnest money deposit that you're putting down when you're writing that offer, it is safe through that home inspection period. If you back out based on what that home inspection says, or you can't come to terms through negotiation with that seller, the only money that you should be out is the cost of that home inspection, right? But it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth that $500, $600 for the home inspection.
Right.
To not get stuck with the house with so many issues.
Absolutely.
In my opinion. But negotiate your home inspection. You can negotiate concessions on the price. You can negotiate repairs. You can negotiate any part of that contract based off of what you find out in that home inspection, because it's still your due diligence period.
Right. All right. With like the offer as a buyer, obviously we kind of talked about this earlier with fees and like selling fees, real estate fees. What are other ways to kind of like make that appealing, like to make your offer appealing? Is there anything other than like you covering the closing costs, you doing those things, anything that like people might not be aware of?
I mean, if you have the cash to be able to pay your own closing costs, I mean, if you're going after a property that has multiple offers, your agent should be asking the listing agent, do you have any other offers?
Right.
The answer is no. I mean, I'm going to ask for closing costs. I'm going to ask for
Of course, yeah.
if it's a multiple offer situation, then yeah, I mean, we need to sit down. We need to sit and talk with your lender. We need to see your financial standing. Do we back up off the closing costs a little bit? Do we only ask for 1.5%? Do we ask for 2%? Do we ask for none? Do we shorten our home inspection period? A lot of times I can get my home inspector out to a property within 3 days. So do I do 5 instead of 10? So at least the seller knows, okay, well, I'll know in 5 days whether or not this buyer is moving forward or not.
Right.
Because when you write 10 days in a seller's mind, it's like, okay, well, if they back out, I've spent 10 days off the market.
Right.
I can shorten that typically in less than a week, right?
Yeah.
You can put that you'll pay for the termite moisture inspection as the buyer at your cost. You'll order it and you'll get it at your cost. What other things can you do?
Yeah.
Local lender. So listing agents like myself, we like to see local lenders on the other sides of deals. We don't like to see these big national banks typically, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that communication tends to be better with local lenders. And local lenders, look, the cost typically is very similar for everyone. They just package it differently, right? You break down the cost of all these different loans between Bank of America and an Atlantic Bay who's local,
Right.
or USAA versus Atlantic Bay on their VA loans, they're going to be very similar.
Right.
Like, one fee might be higher here and less here, and more expensive here and less here.
Right. It all
and at the
evens
end of the
out.
day, they're going to be very close to each other.
Yeah.
But the local bank over here, I'm going to be able to call them on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. when you're wanting to make an offer on a property and get an answer to a question that I might have to wait till Monday on these bigger banks.
So things move quicker, a little more seamless, like able to get answers and keep that trouble. Because like you mentioned, the less days could be appealing, but I'd say like your perspective of like a selling agent, for you to have to go back and remarket a house, losing 5 days, like that's effort out of that's more time you're wasting in the process, and time is money. You know what I'm saying? So like that could be a huge appealing. Like, hey, we'll cut down these time frames, and you're like, dang, all right, I'd rather do that because I know I have a less likely chance to be the house be on the market for longer.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, another thing that listing agent, I know we keep like going back and forth here, but I mean, I do both. So it's kind of, a lot of people, there's buyer's agents and listing agents. I love to do both.
Yeah.
But the one thing that your listing agent should be doing,
Yeah.
when you get an offer in, and I can assure you,
Uh-huh.
90% of listing agents do not do this. They should be calling the lender. So when I receive an offer on a property, I get a pre-approval letter or pre-approval, whatever, pre-approval, proof of funds, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a cash offer, I'm getting a proof of funds. If it's a pre-approval letter, I'm getting it from the lender. I'm calling the lender and I'm saying, how strong is this buyer? How confident are you that you can get them to closing?
Right.
Right? I'm asking certain questions to see, are we going to have any issues with financing? Is this financing going to fall apart? Are they strong?
Right.
Getting all of these answers up front.
And you can do that, huh? I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
There should be open communication between everybody. The purchase agreement states that communication is basically open between the listing agent, the selling agent, the lenders, and the attorneys to make sure that it is a seamless process from A to Z.
Interesting.
But I can assure you, 90% of listing agents are not calling the lenders on these offers that they're getting.
Yeah.
And then when all of a sudden they get a letter that says, uh-oh, so and so, rates just went up and we just went to whatever, so and so is no longer approved. We went to do the true loan application and now they've lost their loan approval and
like, what the hell?
we're out.
Yeah.
Then you have to go back to your seller and they're like, what the hell?
Right. Yeah. It's important. Calm communication, that's it.
Communication is key to real estate.
Yeah, facts. We kind of went into important things for sellers to do to get their house ready. Like we kind of talked about that. How do you determine the right listing price as a seller? Obviously working with your real estate agent, but what are some factors and some things that you use as a real estate agent to help the seller set that price?
So pricing is one of the hardest things that real estate agents learn to do. Fortunately, I come from a mother who's owned a local appraising firm for 40 years.
Yeah.
And when I decided I was going to get into real estate instead of go to law school, wasn't happy about that. But she said you're going to know how to price real estate. So what we do, it's a lot of time, but it's all data. What we do is we go back through and we look at the most recent sales. We call them comparable sales. What I like to do is I like to go back the past 90 days and see what has sold within a neighborhood that is comparable to your house. Size, bathrooms, condition. Okay. But it's not always that easy.
Right.
You know, sometimes you have to go outside of a neighborhood. You have to find comparable land values, comparable neighborhoods.
Right,
You have to find comparable condition. And a lot of people get into the weeds about, well, this kitchen costs me X, Y, and Z. One thing I tell people all the time is that we don't live in a New York, Miami, DC market. So when an appraiser comes to give a value of your home when you have an offer on the table, they don't care whether your countertops are Carrara marble, granite, or quartz. They're going to say you have hard surface countertops. Okay?
Right.
When they come and they see a pool, they don't care if you spend $150,000 on that in-ground pool or $50,000 on that in-ground pool.
It's just
They see an in-ground pool. They don't care what you have around it. They don't care how many jets. They don't care if it has lights. They don't care if it has a fountain.
It doesn't affect the value.
value.
Interesting.
So these are all things that we as listing agents have to take into consideration, and you have to portray that to your seller.
Right.
So if my seller is telling me, and I keep relationships with my sellers, as you know.
Yeah.
So I have clients. I have clients call me all the time and say, "Hey, I'm getting ready to redo my kitchen. What do you think I should do?" I'm going to give them my opinion. I had a client call me a few months ago. I'm looking into putting new countertops in, blah, 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 blah. The counter slab that she chose was $65,000.
Damn.
And I was like, please do not put that in.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, you can find a quartz countertop that matches that same look, because I know it's
cheaper, yeah.
If it's your forever home and you're going to die in that house and you want that $65,000 countertop,
send it, yeah.
put it in.
Yeah.
But I know it's not her forever house.
Right.
And I know when we go to sell it, she's going to look at me and be like, those countertops were $65,000.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The buyer's not going to be like, ooh, you know?
Right.
It's not going to matter. It's not going to matter to the value. So it's important for a listing agent to price it in its overall condition, to find comparables that are in the similar overall condition, in similar neighborhoods, similar size, and price the most recent sales. A lot of times we'll see, I had somebody one time send me, I was writing an offer, and I'll pull comps. So when I'm writing an offer for a buyer, I'm looking at the comparable sales too.
Right.
Because I want to know
what else sold.
What else?
Yeah.
Sold, how close? I mean, is this property properly priced? Right.
Right.
If I think that it's overpriced, I'm going to send some comparable sales along with my purchasing, or along with my buyer's offer.
Right.
Some agents.
So that's important. That's yeah.
Most agents aren't going to do that, but I mean, I think it's important if it's a lowball offer to explain why my offer is the way that it is.
Right. Well, it's important to be mindful of the comparables, because that's what's going to base your home value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are so many agents out there that are using AI to price, or they're using they're going on to. So we have on our MLS, there's something called Realist. And it's basically the MLS tax record of the property. So if I pulled up the MLS on your computer right now and pulled up your address, I could go down, it would say real AVM, which they're saying is your real estate market value. I guarantee you the price difference between the base and the high end of your house right now is about $70,000 because of your neighborhood.
Right.
We live in a neighborhood that is 3 2-bath ranchers all the way up to 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom.
Right, it's a very high variety. Yeah.
There's a high variety. So when they're pulling that from an algorithm, they're just pulling these little numbers. They're not seeing the minute details that only we can see on the data by pulling it
Right, which
and looking
matters
at
to an actual.
it. Correct. It
Right.
matters to an actual list price.
Yeah.
But so many agents will go in there, look at that, pull the average price, and tell a seller that that's what it's valued at.
Oh yeah, that's not
When
good.
I'm coming to you, I'm giving
Yeah,
you a
you're
comparative
doing your
market
research. You know what you're
analysis, and
doing.
I'm showing
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
123
Right.
Main Street, 463 Melbury Street, like showing you the differences,
Yeah.
and then giving you the adjustments for, like, let's say one of them had an updated kitchen and yours doesn't. I'm going to give you an overall adjustment for what an appraiser is going to apply for that.
Got you. Before I move into like strategies of marketing for selling, I want to ask you. Like I thought of it like, so you brought up the $65,000 countertop. It's not going to bring value to your home, but what kind of things should people be mindful of? Like, hey, if I do this, this will add value. If I do that, it will add value. Not like legit monetary value of what you put in, you get, but just things that would be more appealing to where you'll bump your offer up or your house value up because of like having a deck or something.
Well, I mean, I think that it it's hard because everybody, we go. If you remember 5 years ago, you were looking at all these houses. What color were you seeing on the wall?
I think like, I don't know.
Gray.
Gray, okay. Yeah.
Gray
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah.
Gray
Paint gray.
floors,
Yeah.
gray walls,
Right.
gray cabinets. I mean, everybody had this vision that it was gray, and now it's white. It's like everything is white, right? But I always encourage my homeowners and my clients, like, make it your own. Like, do what you want to do. Do an LVP flooring. That most people are going to go LVP. They don't want to spend the money on hardwood floors unless
Right.
they're in a higher end market. Do LVP floors, but pick a color that you want. Do new cabinets with soft close, but do a color that you want. Do a hard surface countertop. Do a color that you want. But I mean, try and keep it appealing to the masses. I mean, look,
Right.
my taste is going to be different from yours,
Right.
right? But I don't know. I'm kind of sick of the white kitchen with the white countertops. I'm sick of the gray floors with the gray cabinets.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just, I think you should make it your own, but I think that going in with LVP flooring, new cabinets, I like quartz countertops.
Right. So like any kind of hard flooring, not staying away from carpets except for bedrooms kind of stuff.
That's personal thing. I
Right,
like carpet
true.
in a bedroom. I don't like to. I like carpet in a bedroom.
Yeah.
It's, for me, but yeah.
The hardwood floors is like from my novice understanding,
Yeah.
it's like, ooh, that house has hardwood floors.
Yes.
That's more appealing. That's worth more.
That's my
for
personal
value.
preference is hardwood floors.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So I mean, I have hardwood floors, but if you're renovating a home, right? So if you're buying a home that as a first time home buyer, or if you're buying a house that needs a little bit of TLC, the cost of hardwood floors to install is just astronomical, right?
Right.
I think that LVP is more cost effective to get the look, get the easy maintenance,
And the
get
value
easy
goes
to
up in a
clean.
sense. Yeah.
The value goes up. And then for bathrooms, I mean,
His or her sinks.
always.
That raises value, you'd say?
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
always. I mean, the thing about value too is sellability.
Mhm.
Right? So you want a buyer to walk in and you want a buyer to see it and be able to see themselves living in your home.
Right, right.
There are certain things that add value because more buyers are going to find it appealing,
Yes.
right? So it's going to appeal to more masses and it's going to make you more valuable. But what doesn't make it more valuable is that your countertops cost $65,000.
Of course. Yes,
to
yes, yes.
$5,000 to $10,000. Do you
Right.
get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do feel like there's a lot of things that like even I think about. I'm like, sometimes I'm like, what could I add to make it more appealing or to make the
Yeah.
value go up?
Yeah.
But it's important to know like it's not necessarily about how much you spend. It's about just the little conveniences that appeal to people that will make them want to pay more.
Yeah.
But I guess the one question I had in my head was well, you've heard the expression like the value or the amount that you'll get is like how much is it worth to you, I should say. Like how much is this worth to you? Is that mentality or that saying applicable in real estate?
I mean, it is and it isn't, because how much is it worth to you while you're living there? Right? So if you wanted to put in a new pool and that new pool is going to cost you $100,000, you're not going to get $100,000 for that pool when you go to sell it. So how much is it worth to you while you're living there and for your use of that pool?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lender is only going to give a buyer what an appraiser says that home is valued at,
Right.
right? And the appraiser cannot be held, at least in our area, an appraiser cannot be expected to be kept up with the values and the depreciation
Mm-hmm.
of every single type of countertop, color of countertop, type of tile, type of pool.
Right.
They just can't. So what they have to do is they have to have an average value for certain items like that and apply it across the board.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. Because again, it would be far too difficult for them.
It'd be crazy to go in depth.
Like
yeah.
this is some, Tahitian,
right.
whatever wood. I mean, they can't do that.
Like, let me see receipts. You're just like, what the heck?
And where's the comp for it?
Right.
Whereas, like, if you're looking in somewhere like New York, that's an ultra luxury market. If you have $65,000 quartzite countertops, then you can probably find 100 sales that had quartzite countertops.
Fair.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas here, you're gonna have to go outside of your market to find a luxury home that's sold.
That stuff. Yeah. That makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. All right. As a seller, how do you manage multiple offers? How do you recommend a seller managing that? I'm selling my home. I wake up the next morning. I got 5-10 offers for this house. How are you managing that? How do I manage that?
We touched on that.
Yeah.
So your realtor should bring you what we call a net to seller sheet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to bring you a document that breaks down the purchase price, the loan type, the closing date, what concessions they're asking for. So are they asking for closing costs? Are they asking for any type of repair up front?
Right.
Are they asking for a carpet allowance? Are they asking for a paint allowance?
Yeah.
What are they asking you to pay their buyer's agent?
Right.
Whether it's 2%, 2.5%, 3%, what have you. Who their lender is. Is it a local lender? Is it a big bank? All of those things. And we're going to have them all columned out so that you can see it. And then at the very bottom, we're going to show you what your estimated profit is going to be after the payoff of your mortgage. Because if you have a mortgage, hopefully you've given me whatever your payoff is. And
right.
We're going to estimate what you're going to net at closing.
Right. So I guess that sounds like a silly question then, because at the end of the day, you're going to take the offer that would benefit you financially the most.
Not always, because sometimes time is money. I've had a client.
Okay.
I had a client take an offer that was $5,000 less because it was closing.
That makes sense.
Closed a month sooner, and he had to go.
Right. So it'd be like, hey, what are the offers? What am I trying to do? When am I trying to get out of here? When is this house going to get sold so I can figure it out? Am I using this house to buy another house? Right. So I got to sell this before I buy a house. So you want it done quick.
Right.
So there's a bunch of factors. It just comes down to the individual seller communicating with your realtor. Right. Yeah, I got you. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really ultimately up to like we can give you advice, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. But I mean, I can't choose your offer.
Of course.
You're going to choose it. And
yeah. I mean, you educate your sellers or your buyers as much as you can,
right?
So they can make the decision.
Right. They're going to say, which one would you choose? And I'm going to say, I can't tell you that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So if anyone needs a real estate agent, where can they find you at?
I'm here. You can find me on Instagram at CJG_realtor. You can find me at, hopefully you're going to post my business.
I will, absolutely. Yeah, it'll be in the description.
Post my business.
Absolutely will, man. Yo, man, appreciate your time. You've been crushing it. I appreciate the help that you gave us with this house. And yeah, man, keep crushing it. I hope everyone comes and checks out your pages and uses you. Easy day, man.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend.
Awesome. You too.
Yeah, thanks, bro.